People need something to live for. Without that thing to live for, what does a person have? This seems a bleak thing, but the beauty of this apparent tragedy is that, as corny as it sounds, there's always a thing to live for. Turn to religion, any one of them. Don't like any? Make one up. From Pastafarians to Christians, religions offer spiritual security, albeit in their own sense, and one must follow those confines of said religion. Or one could turn to philosophy. Philosophy can encompass so much. It's not the direct opposite of religion, but it also is. You can be like Kant or Descartes, whose philosophies prove that God exists instead of relying on simply faith. Or you can be like Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, who claim God is dead and the dogmas established by religion are untrue. Or, more realistically, as human nature permits, take a bit of it all. Humans cannot be always expected to follow their faith or beliefs to a T at all times, nor should we be confined to one way of thinking. Philosophies and religions can be mixed and mashed into whatever you want it to be. And if you're charismatic enough, you may be able to start a new school of thought, be it religion or philosophy. A philosophy well worth sharing is Cynicism, in hopes that you may even just consider it when in need of spiritual security. Cynicism is an old philosophy started around 400 BCE in Greece. It was around this era that philosophy started booming and rivaled the power of Zeus and his pantheon. A humanistic burst of knowledge and profound thinking several centuries before the Renaissance and Enlightenment of Europe. As a student of Socrates, Antisthenes took inspiration from Socrates' teachings and way of carefree living and modeled Cynicism. Based in Athens, Antisthenes would preach that in order to earn happiness, one must achieve virtue in agreement with nature. One must understand and have the strength to want nothing and lack nothing, to denounce convention and act in what Antisthenes called anadia, or shamelessness. This shamelessness entails that they would act in ways where conventional people would be revolted by. They would vehemently criticize men for how they lived and religious ceremonies like sacrifices and elaborate rituals for their absurdity. Given this was around 300 BCE, this was controversial and bold. They constantly outraged their fellow men by carrying rude, absurd, vulgar acts mixed with their shocking extremes of speech to jolt the attention of the ancient equivalent of the average Joe. Extreme mental fortitude was needed to be a cynic, and commitment to living free of care from man-made constructs like wealth, property, family duties, and so on. To solidify this as gospel, Antisthenes wrote 10 volumes that further the ideals of Cynicism. One titled Hercules depicts the hero in a glorified light, for he is a great cynic and virtuous man. Others, such as Alcibiades, Archelaus, and Politicus, which denounce self-passion, tyranny, and democracy respectively. Though their ways seemed coarse and ignorant, they were nonetheless motivated by a deep concern for fellow man, and a desire to share the freedom found in the independence of mind and spirit, those by which cynics strive for. My favorite cynic, Diogenes of Sinope, is a freak when it comes to cynicism. Diogenes, an exile of his hometown Sinope, traveled to Athens, where he studied under Antisthenes and promptly decided to live a simple life. Simple life is a criminal understatement, though. Diogenes was referred to by his contemporaries as Socrates gone mad, for Socrates was known for having a simple way of living. In this regard, Diogenes deserves his epithet, for Diogenes owned a single cloak that could fold in two, to keep him warm in winter and cool in summer. He always was barefoot, and carried a knapsack of food he obtained from begging and stealing. Diogenes is known to have said, "I am a citizen of the world," for he never lived in one place too long. Occasionally, he'd sleep in front of temples and statues of gods, and most notably inside a large ceramic jar. Diogenes would masturbate in public, urinate on people who argued or shamed him, and defecate in public as well. There's an anecdote of Diogenes telling that he'd attend his contemporary, Plato's, lectures and voluntarily release his bowels, just to anger Plato. Diogenes gained notoriety and a following in his cynic lifestyle. Even Alexander the Great remarked on Diogenes, saying, "If I weren't Alexander, I would have liked to be Diogenes," which is ironic, given Diogenes likely hated Alexander the Great for his immense wealth and status. Diogenes, despite all the aforementioned information, was still a philosopher and taught students his interpretations of Antisthenes' cynicism. Diogenes did not believe in society, nor entertained human nature. He didn't fear for the future, nor lived in the past. He lived day to day. As his peers discussed metaphysics, or the structure and basis of our reality and human's place in the universe, and so on, Diogenes rejected the discussion, as it was a waste of time and a distraction from the moment. Cynics are considered the first anarchists, and though it's not entirely false, they are also among the first satirists. Oenomos of Gadara wrote satirical works condemning institutions, such as the oracles of Delphi and Claros. And there's Crates of Thebes, a student of Diogenes, who wrote pieces of satire that mocked others and praised cynicism in a witty manner, while sailing the seas with his girl without a care in the world. Or Peregrinus Proteus, an ex-Christian from Palestine who went to Egypt and studied cynicism there. He then openly preached against the Romans and the emperor at the time, gathering a large following. He then proclaimed at the next Olympic Games he'd burn himself alive in order to die a golden death like Hercules. And that he did, self-immolating himself in 165 at the Olympics, and commingled with the aether as he wanted. Now, sure, these individuals took the writings of Antisthenes to the nth degree, but there is some truly thought-provoking sentiments these ancient anarchists provided, as in living with shamelessness, not always following conventions, and being independent of the masses. Especially in our modern era, individuality is more important than it has ever been. You can lose who you are just by being a part of the whole behind your screen. Don't be afraid to reject modernity sometimes for your own sake. Remember, most problems in life are superficial and can be solved better with the mindset that they are, in fact, just superficial.